Stay one step ahead with Dubai Eye.
Around the world. First of all, Brexit, because the UK budget came along yesterday. Headline is the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, saying that austerity is coming to an end. With the uncertainty of Brexit round the corner, is it the right time to loosen the purse strings, do you think?
I think it is the right time to loosen the purse strings, but let's listen carefully to what he said. Austerity is coming to an end. He didn't say austerity has come to an end. So it's coming to an end, but not just yet. It has been a little bit positive on the budget, especially for the NHS. He's trying to attract more investment in the UK in light of Brexit, but this is not a very aggressive and a very expansionary budget. It's coming to an end, austerity, but not just yet. We have to wait a little bit further. And the Chancellor was very careful as well. It will all depend on how the Brexit negotiations go out. The key concern with Brexit, the key difficulty is the border with Ireland. If the British government is willing to accept a border, then the agreement could be very easy and pretty straightforward. If it isn't, and it doesn't seem to be willing to accept the border with Ireland, then there is a slight complication. So do we have a hard Brexit? That would have negative implications on economic performance. Another possibility is that we have what we call a BINO solution, Brexit in name only, where Britain has to pay the cost of being in the European Union. It has to follow all the European rules as if it were a member of the European Union, but has absolutely no say in shaping these forms. Practically that would be a terrible result for Britain because they haven't really gained anything from leaving the European Union, and they lost the say in shaping policy and shaping rules. These are the scenarios: hard Brexit, Brexit in name only, or some other third way where a compromise is reached. But it's looking very difficult and it's looking very confusing from the outside. I'm not too sure Britain itself knows exactly what it wants. There are different segments, especially in the Tory party, that are asking for completely different things. And I do not envy Theresa May that has to bridge all these different views and come up with a coherent approach.
It does seem that even people who did vote for Brexit are not really quite sure that this is what they expected to get in the run-up to it. Let's have a look at mainland Europe. And yesterday, S&P held off downgrading Italy's credit rating, and the MIB, the FTSE MIB index there in Milan, was up by about 2%, but it's has been over the last couple of weeks a big worry for Europe.
It was a big worry for Europe for the past 9 years, as far as I was concerned. I always thought Italy was a bigger concern for Europe than Greece ever was. And it's because of several factors. First of all, size. It's a massive economy. It's too big to fail. It's also too big to bail out. The second reason is that unlike Greece, Italy is to a great extent self-sufficient. Italy exports more than it imports. It generates more revenues from its exports than it spends on its imports. And if you're self-sufficient, it gives you the courage to go ahead and go your own way sometimes. Debt is high, indeed, government debt, but there are two significant differences. It's a legacy issue. It's not new debt. It's debt from several decades ago that Italy has been stuck with. And most of the debt, Italian debt, is held by Italians themselves. It's not held by foreign investors. It's a little bit like Japan. Japan is one of the most highly indebted governments in the world. But there is no crisis in Japan because government debt, which is a liability for the government, is held by Japanese households, which is an asset for Japanese households. It's a slightly similar situation in Italy as well.
Let's, before we take a break, we are going to hold you over a little bit longer, Marius, but before we do, let's talk about Greece and Cyprus, but particularly Cyprus, which a few years ago was limiting people going to ATMs and taking money out. I think it was about 20 euros a day, something like that, and a lot of Russian investors lost money in Cyprus. How has that come back over the last 5 or 6 years? I mean, you were there last week, so what have you been seeing?
Confidence has fully recovered. It was a very painful adjustment for Cyprus. Although it was painful, given all the bad options that were available, I think that was the most sensible option to go with a haircut of depositors in the problematic banks. A very unpopular decision, a very painful decision, but within 2 years, Cyprus was able to be growing positively, and Cyprus was also able to remove capital controls. So you had free capital mobility within 2 years, which is something that, to be honest, I wasn't expecting them to be able to remove capital controls so quickly.
One thing they have done is give away passports on the purchase of a certain. If you spend a certain amount on property, a new build property, you can have a passport, and that's attracted a lot of Chinese people in. So the property market seems to have been recovering as well.
Property markets in different areas have recovered.
Certainly, Paphos end of the island seems to have recovered.
Paphos, Limassol, I think it's throughout the island, but places like Limassol have seen most of the appreciation, and I think they're probably becoming a little bit too pricey at the moment. It's pricing the locals out of the market. I'm not a big fan of a real estate based development plan. I think it was needed, given that Cyprus was in a crisis and it wanted to come out of a crisis. So some capital inflows were very welcome indeed. But given that Cyprus is already out of the crisis now, we're not in crisis mode, I think Cyprus should be looking very hard at a sustainable development model. And I'm not convinced at all that real estate and passports will be that model.
Stay one step ahead with Dubai Eye.